Yep. All right, we're going to show you how to install the 48 volt 3-phase spindle in your Hydra. What you see here is what's going to come in your kit. You have the motor itself, you have the wrenches for the collet, the controller circuit board, the power supply, and the address resistor. This is what's going to tell the software how to talk to the machine. You also get some cable ties, and these are a few tools that you'll need. You'll want some screwdrivers, a 3mm hex driver, a number 2 Phillips, a small flat bladed screwdriver for the screw terminals here, and some wire cutters and wire strippers. So we're going to start by installing the power supply, just using the screws and washers that are supplied. These are M4 screws. They're going to have a 3mm driver. Before you get started with anything in here though, make sure you unplug the machine for safety, and don't attempt this unless you're comfortable in working with high voltages. Alright, so once these screws are tight, I'm going to get my number 2 Phillips screwdriver. We'll take the little safety cover off the screw terminals on your power supply. Just don't lose that, because we're going to put that back when we're done. And you'll loosen these 3 terminal screws. You'll see you have these smaller wires coming off of your power supply here, black for line, white for neutral, green for ground. And these are going to share the connection with the power supply wires. So you're going to slide one fork terminal in, make sure the other fork terminal is flat, facing down on top of the other one, and tighten the screw. All right, so once you talking.
Yeah, put them over there.
Alright, so once you get all 3 of the wires connected with the existing power wires, tighten everything down, give everything a pull, make sure everything's tight, make sure none of the connectors slipped out while you were tightening the wires, or tightening the screws, excuse me. Alright, so that's secured. I'm going to put the cover back on. Alright. So now I'm going to get the motor driver. And we'll also have 2 more M4 screws to mount this. Start by putting one screw in. I don't think they know we're making a film here. Alright, so now the driver is installed. You see this 2-pin connector just plugs in right here. And that's going to be for the power. Alright, next I'm going to get some wire cutters. And the rest of my tools here. You're going to have a bundle of cables on the top of your chassis that includes this rainbow ribbon cable. This is the cable that takes power from the driver to the spindle motor in the yoke. If yours is not already stripped, you want to peel away the individual strands, strip back about 1/4 of an inch, and if you look at the color code, these colors are going to match the colors that are on your yoke. And in the first 3, you see that we've doubled up the wires. That's because these are the ones that actually take power to the motor, so they're carrying the most current. So we've doubled those up. The rest are just the signal for the encoder that reads the RPM, so they're fine to just be a single wire. And this is where your small flat-bladed screwdriver comes in. All right, if you look on your motor driver, you have U, V, and W. Those are the 3 legs of the winding on the motor. So those are going to go in the first 3 terminals on the connector. This is a little long. I'm going to trim it a little bit so it fits a little better. If you're confused about the order of the wires, you just want to make sure that this matches the order that they appear on the yoke, and I will show you in a moment which terminals correspond to these so you can see that they are the same colors. All right, so now that these are installed here, if you see the colors here, and this is going to correspond to the connector here on the yoke, and it actually starts with the 3rd position here. The first 2 are an additional 12-volt rail that's coming to power your heads, so then the motor cables are the last 8 positions in this connector. So you see the first 3 are doubled up wires, then the last 5 are the individual wires. So make sure this color pattern here matches the color pattern down here, and you'll be fine. See that is going to plug in right there. The little controller board is going to plug in right here, and you'll notice there's a loose wire on the controller board. If you see on the circuit board, this goes to a position that says Hall C. That means it's going to one of the Hall effect sensors on the encoder on the motor, or on the motor that's sensing the rotation. And that's going to enable us to read RPMs on the motor. And that's going to share a position with this wire. And this may be easier to do with it unplugged. There you go. So now those 2 wires are sharing that position, Hall C. It's marked HC on top here. And that's plugging in right here. Okay, next thing we're going to do is get this cable here, which is the control cable for the CAN bus system that enables the software to talk to the spindle controller. Be very careful here. You notice I'm being very careful not to cut the wires when I'm cutting this zip tie. I just want to release this one cable here. I'm going to get our address resistor that was in the kit, which, where did I put it? Here it is. So you'll take your address resistor, which is simply a 5/60 ohm resistor installed in a little jumper. And if you look at your connector, and you can even look at your circuit board, on the back of the circuit board, there's a pin that says POS. That means position. And you're going to go from the position pin to the ground pin. So there's only one way this plugs in because there are little tabs here. So you can see that on the position and ground, it's right there in the middle on the fourth pin from the end. I'm going to put one end of the resistor there and the other one to ground. And now the controller is going to know that this controller is operating the spindle tool. Okay, so we're going to plug this back in. And that plugs into your controller. Alright, so now that that wiring is done, we just want to clean up this mess in here. I'm going to take some of your cable ties and neatly route your wires. The cable ties that you cut previously, just replace those with another one, with a new one here. To run the excess of this ribbon cable up to the top of the machine. And then over here we'll rebundle this group of wires back on the top. You should have the little plastic zip tie mounts up here that were pre-installed in the machine. You'll notice there are some wires that are not connected to anything. These are just some auxiliary wires in case you have a special application in the future, but they're currently not connected on either end. So they can just be neatly bundled with the other wires. And I'm going to get one more large zip tie to fix that. Alright, so now your motor driver is installed, and now we can install the motor into the yoke. So the three-phase motor is going to go into the yoke like any other head, except there's no circuit board here because the controller is down below. And because the spindle motor is going to take a lot of stress, there are some additional mounting screws. You have your two standard screws from the back, and then down here on the front we have two additional screws, and these put some pressure out this way to lock it into the dovetail on the yoke. You want to tighten those evenly with equal torque on each side so you don't overstress it in one particular direction. So now that is rigidly attached to the yoke. See, this connector is going to plug straight in here. And if you notice, the 3 motor windings line up with those double wires that we installed in the driver. Then the Hall effect sensor for to read the RPMs line up with the other wires. So now you can turn your machine back on. And if we come over here to in Repetrel to the CNC tab, now you'll see that the drill mill is showing up. And if I hit that button to turn it on, now you can tell it's spinning. Okay, and that's how you install it. Once everything's installed and you ensure that everything is working properly, it's always good to turn your machine off. You can take a hot glue gun if you want and put a little bead of glue across the top of these wires, and this adds a little extra degree of strain relief and protection to the wires in case in the future you're ever unplugging it, so you don't accidentally break the wire in the connector. Alright, any other questions, please contact Davo. He'll be happy to help.